Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this conference, and thank you, Justin. Terrific presentation. We are actually very lucky to have been able to involve Justin in Australia. He's visiting here and living here for 6 months, or hopefully more, and has recently agreed to run one of the work streams under the Iot Alliance Australia, which I'll describe in a moment. So here's the moment where I discover whether or not I can manipulate the slides. Am I using the mouse, Laurie, or something else? This one? Oh, yeah, that's good. Thank you. So my name's John Stanton. I'm the CEO of Communications Alliance, which is, if you like, the industry association for the telco sector. But 2 years ago, we decided to set up an IoT think tank within Communications Alliance because we sensed there was a gap in the market here. The more developed and more progressive countries in the world, including the UK and South Korea and others, had really cottoned on to the transformative importance of IoT and what it was going to mean for the global economy and national economies. And we felt we were a bit behind the game in Australia. So at the end of this little chat, I want to tell you about the Alliance and how it grew out of that initial think tank. And I wasn't much involved in IoT prior to 3 years ago. The reason that I've become so interested in it and the reason so many people are so excited about it is that it appears that it really is going to transform the world in many, many ways and quite quickly. We look back to the first industrial revolution, which got off to a slightly shaky start when the Luddites smashed the looms back in 1870 or thereabouts. 100 years on, and the second industrial revolution and things like conveyor belts and so forth were coming into factories. Skip forward another 100 years and we get to the third industrial revolution based on the use of electronics and IT to further automate production. And now we're really at the cusp of the fourth industrial revolution based around cyber capability and IoT. And to talk about the IoT process very briefly, if you like, there are many ways of breaking it down schematically. It starts, of course, with data generation, typically via sensors, which might be measuring the temperature or any one of a number of other parameters, transported on a whole range of different connectivity options. They might be narrowband networks, low-powered, wide area networks, cellular, even satellite, onto a platform where the opportunity arises to look at all of that real-world data that's been now turned into digital form and start analysing it to better optimise, find options for better optimising current activity and future activity. That can be turned into a whole range of different outputs and apps, and that ultimately drives the economic value that can come out of IoT. We've talked about it for a long time. Even 5 years ago, IoT was a bit of a kind of a geeky concept that might come up at a dinner party and raise some scratching of heads. But now, for a range of reasons, it's really at the centre of every conversation we have about the digital future of the nation and the world. And a number of factors have really combined to tip the balance in favour of this becoming a transformative reality rather than a dinner party conversation. The cost of sensors has dropped enormously over the past 10 years, as has their size. At the same time, the capability is growing. In China, in Shenzhen, in the Huawei labs, they're now producing sensors that are about the size of your little fingernail and have a 10-year battery life, and cost less than 50 cents. and the aim is to improve all of those parameters and get the cost down to something like 10 cents or below. And so with that sort of cost base and the beauty of a 10-year battery life before you've got to replace anything, you've suddenly really got the capability to put millions of additional sensors into networks and into industrial and social applications. At the same time, the cost of bandwidth has fallen fairly dramatically in the last 10 years, as has the cost of storage and processing. So all of those factors together really have tipped the balance in favour of IoT becoming a very pervasive reality. At the moment, I think we've got about 15 billion devices connected to the internet worldwide, growing rapidly. Everyone's got their own estimate. I like 1 trillion by 2035 because it's a nice round number. But whatever it is, an enormous explosion in the number of sensors and devices connected to the internet over the next few years. So I think what I was asked to talk about today was, how we can take advantage of the opportunity that the Internet of Things presents for Australia. And there's no doubt, based on the research that we and others have done, that there is a tremendous opportunity here for Australia. We may be a little behind the front runners, but it's not impossible for us to catch up. And indeed, if we think about it wisely enough, discover the areas, the niches within the IoT where Australia actually can be a world-leading player and can generate not only benefits for our national economy, but real export opportunities. And some of the work that we've done suggests that by 2025, provided we play our cards reasonably well, the IoT will be worth up to about $120 billion a year in additional GDP in Australia. And if you can think of another development that might generate that sort of annual increase to our national wealth, then tell me about it, because I don't think there is one. And the benefits can be derived across all of these sectors. But let me try and just give you an example, because the real credo, if you like, of the Iot Alliance has been around collaboration. How do we get a really vibrant, collaborative relationship going across sectors and between government and industry and consumers? And let's think about this problem, for example. By 2050, the world's population is on track to hit about 9.6 billion people, maybe more. And that means that the world will actually have to double its output of food within that time frame. So it's a very big challenge. It's made more difficult by the fact that in the Western world, at least, the production of food is fairly inefficient, in the sense that I'm told that a bit less than 60% of the food produced for human consumption in the Western world actually gets eaten, which is a pretty shocking statistic. And it's not about the fact that you find a soggy cucumber in the bottom of your fridge and chuck it out. It's much more about supply chain efficiency. So a fairly inefficient system that's got to double its output in an increasingly crowded world over coming years. How do we go about it? Well, if we think about the various elements of what puts food on the table, almost all of those can be radically improved by use of the Internet of Things. For a start, Brambles has got 500 million pallets around the world in its global distribution network, many of which are used in order to deliver food from the producer to a distributor and or to the retailer. So 500 million pallets that could be all equipped with sensors, which would mean that at any one time when you're looking at the food supply chain, you know exactly where each order is. And if you have IoT-driven inventory management in all of the stores and outlets and warehouses, then you can make real-time, more efficient decisions about what should go where in order to reduce waste. That alone can make a fairly revolutionary impact on the efficiency of the food industry. But there are plenty of other ways that IoT can actually help out the food itself. Dr. Mike Bryars, who is on the board of the Iot Alliance, he wears a range of hats. He's the UTS industry professor at the Broadway campus in Sydney. He is the founder of the Knowledge Economy Institute, which has just led a consortium that is being set up as the latest cooperative research centre, funded to the tune of $50 million by the federal government, and it's all about food. And he's got 54 partners working with him across distribution channels and sectors to drive the digital transformation of Australia's food industry. And here's a very simple example of one of the things that they're working on at the moment. It turns out that the shelf life of a lettuce is dramatically affected by its moisture content at the time that it's picked. And using IoT and sensors, they're developing ways of ensuring that farmers know exactly what's the right morning, what's the right hour of that morning or afternoon to get that lettuce out of the ground and put it into the supply chain. And if you can improve the shelf life of a lettuce, or all lettuces, just by a day or two, it has a tremendous effect on both the profitability of the supply chain and the reduction of waste. And that sort of improvement can be replicated across many, many, many fresh foods. There's good examples in the oyster industry as well, where we've got connected oysters now. And one of the great issues with an oyster farm is that when it rains in the surrounding areas and you get runoff from that rain, that brings with it contaminants. It reduces the salinity of the water, and it makes the oysters much more prone to disease. And we all know how much fun it is to eat a bad oyster, i.e. not at all. And with these connected oyster farms, they're able to monitor the salinity of the water and make far more accurate predictions about when's the right moment to pull the oysters out of the water until it's safe for them to be back in there again. And on a single oyster farm, every day that you don't have to close the oysters off to the water supply means that you're saving about $100,000. So in that industry, it's a transformative improvement. Of course, if we are going to double the world's food supply, we're probably going to need more water. One of the great limiting factors in this country, of course, for agriculture is the amount of water. And if you look at the potential of IoT to improve that situation, is fairly dramatic as well. The Council of Townsville ran a trial where all they basically did was they set up a real-time portal so that the people who were participating in the trial could see on a minute-by-minute basis how much water they were using, how that compared to how much they used yesterday and last week, and so on and so forth. And the study found that more than half of those involved modified their behaviour just because they had the data about how much water they were using. The other thing that the trial did was put sensors into the network, and these managed to reduce the average time taken to report a leak in the system from about a month down to 1 day. So yeah, one of the major inefficiencies in any water system use, of course, is leaks, and getting rid of those makes a big difference. Anyway, by the end of the trial, Townsville were using 10% less water than previously. And just imagine if you could replicate that sort of result across the country, and if Australia had an additional 10% of water to devote to agriculture, what new crops, what new industries you could create. It would be tremendously powerful. At the same time, the use of IoT sensors in agriculture is enabling farmers not just to improve their yields, but to do so while using less pesticide and less water. So you've got this virtuous circle of factors that can dramatically impact our agricultural industry in Australia and around the world, all driven by IoT, and collectively, hopefully, enough to help us meet the challenge of doubling food production within the next several decades. So that's just one area, I guess, of potential illustration of how IoT can help. On the vehicle side, for example, the introduction of driverless vehicles, McKinsey say will cut the the number of accidents by 90%, with tremendous onward impacts to the cost of health. The other thing about driverless vehicles is I'm told if you look at the CBD of any given city, about 30% of the people driving around are actually looking for parking. So if you have a driverless vehicle system and smart parking, you can have a really large impact on the amount of congestion within the CBD. The other thing is, of course, there's a huge amount of real estate in CBDs that are devoted to car parking. And if you don't have people doing the most inefficient thing in the world, which I must admit I do, which is driving a car to your office and letting it sit there all day and then driving home, if you don't need the real estate for those car parks, there's a whole host of additional or alternative uses to which they can be put. So there are those sorts of examples in every one of these sectors, and you know, the challenge really is for Australia to find the bits that we're good at, and agriculture is a great example. You know, we have a really strong brand as a high-quality, safe manufacturer of food. If we combine that with some smarts around the IoT, we can really leverage the two, I think, to very good effect. So this is the Iot Alliance Australia. As I said, a couple of years ago we started a little think tank within Comms Alliance, and we weren't sure how it would go. It turns out it grew like topsy. Before we knew it, we had more than 100 organisations that had joined up. It's now up to about 140, and we've got 450 participants working in the 6, soon to become 7 work streams, which is really tremendous. It very quickly became obvious that Comms Alliance, in my organisation, shouldn't try and own this thing, but rather, for its own sake and probably for ours, it was better to set it up as an independent, not-for-profit entity, which we did last year, and that's how the Alliance was born. We got some terrific people involved. Gavin Smith, who's the president of Bosch Australia, is the chair. Mike Bryars, who I mentioned recently, is on the board as well. We've got the CTO of Nokia, Warren Lemons. We've got very good representation from elsewhere in academia and the consumer movement. We've got Stuart Waite, who's one of our Workstream chairs and is a serial entrepreneur and startup expert on that board as well. So it's working well. My sort of residual role at the moment, if you like, is to chair the executive council that reports to the board, and that's got about 30 entities on it from across government, regulators, and industry and consumers. We've got a lot of the household names from the industry on that executive council. We've been working hard to establish the relationship and get it more vibrant where government's concerned, and we do have the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, the Department of Communications, the regulators, the ACMA, the ACCC, the Privacy Commissioner, and so forth on that group. So it's working pretty well. And then where the rubber really hits the road, Frank Zeichner is the CEO, by the way, a terrific fellow. Where the rubber really hits the road is in the work streams, where we've got one that's devoted to creating a really strong collaborative IoT-aware community in Australia. Catherine Caruana-McManus runs Workstream 2, which is looking across the sectors, the verticals that can really benefit most strongly in Australia from a match-up between the supply and demand side of IoT. So it's got a focus on agriculture, transport, water, electricity and smart cities. Peter Leonard, who's a partner at Gilbert & Tobin and a very esteemed lawyer, chairs the third work stream, and it's looking at how to manage, if you like, the inherent conflict between the need for open data and the need to protect individual privacy. We've got the ACMA chairing a work stream on spectrum availability. Clearly, IoT is not going to flourish unless it has access to the spectrum it needs. Security and network resilience. This group has just put out a guideline on network resilience because while IoT comes with tremendous opportunity, it also presents pretty significant risk, as Justin spoke of, unless security issues are dealt with. We've got about 40 startups working in Workstream 6 with Stuart Waite, trying to marry them up to those who want to invest in them and giving them the tools to flourish. And as Justin explained, what was IoT Australia is, if you like, morphing into Workstream 7 looking at platforms and interoperability, because, as he said, a large part of the value that's going to be created by the IoT is going to be driven by the ability to have secure interoperability. So you can participate in any of these work streams if you would like, no charge, and we'd welcome your involvement. There's an enormous body of talented people there, and if you are at all interested in these topic areas and think you can contribute, I'd very much welcome you to contact us and come along. You can find all the information you need at iot.org.au. I'm out of time. I do thank you very sincerely for the opportunity to be with you this morning, and I'll hand back to Laurie.